Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Energy Realities podcast with our international panel, but we're minus one of the international personalities today. Irina Slav is sitting in front of the fire, apparently, drinking mulled wine and cuddling with her cat Vlad. So, way to go,
Oh,
Irina, having your mulled
There's
wine.
Irina.
and here's her picture right here.
Hopefully she's listening in and laughing at us. So today we have David Blackman, who's at home in Texas. Hi, David. How are you?
Oh, I'm just so happy to be here. I slept like 2 hours the last 3 days, so I'm a little hoarse, but getting better, I think.
Oh, or have you been sick or?
Yeah, just all stopped up and, having a hard
It's
time.
that
Okay.
time of year. Yeah.
What are the fingers taped up for? Did somebody hit you in the nose? What?
I've got a little rash going on. I'm just trying to get rid of it.
Well, don't scratch the cat.
Yep. And we have Stu Turley, who are you in Texas today or Oklahoma?
I'm actually in Oklahoma at the lake house, and I bought a backhoe, and it came some assembly required, and I am so sore I can barely move. I did not understand that some assembly acquired was a Herculean event. So
Assembly required with a backhoe? Oh my gosh.
yeah, I know more about that backhoe than I'd care to, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I got a
I
bunker to
can't put a
build.
bicycle together anymore.
Yeah, it's good to build a bunker. Need that in Oklahoma just in case. What if a tornado comes through? Right?
Absolutely. You bet.
Tornadoes and atom bombs.
That's right. Absolutely. And number 3 today is me, Tammy Nemeth. And I'm here in the UK appreciating another gray day in Britain. So today we're talking about energy coexistence. And the inspiration for today's topic is a piece that came out, I think it was about last week, in Project Syndicate of all places, where two individuals were arguing that, or they submit the position that the energy transition isn't happening the way they want it to, so they need to change the name to energy coexistence. So that's the sort of theme for today's conversation. What exactly does energy coexistence mean? And David, let's start with you. What do you think it means?
Well, it means exactly what we've been saying on this show since its inception, which is that we're going to need more of everything. And that each energy source has its role to play in our society going forward. But the demand is rising so rapidly because all of our inventions, which are wonderful inventions, AI and gadgetry and all this high technology, everything they invent requires more and more energy. And all the data centers that power the AI are multiplying very rapidly all over across the Western world, and I'm sure in Asia and Africa as well. And you have to provide 24/7 reliable, affordable electricity to them. And so
Yeah.
with the rise in demand, and it's not just those things, it's Bitcoin mining, it's recharging the batteries of electric automobiles is a major drain now, and it's only going to grow bigger as EVs get more and more market share, assuming that happens. And even if you replace EVs with hydrogen technology, well, that hydrogen technology is also going to be a power hog, something people hadn't thought about yet, I think. And so you just have to have more and more energy. Already in the United States, we see these big tech companies like Microsoft and Apple and Google, and you just tick them off. They're all trying to secure proprietary sources of 24/7 power generation. And they're not trying to get it from windmills and solar panels combined with 3 hour cycle time lithium batteries. They're doing it by extending the life of coal-fired power plants, extending the life of 3 Mile Island and other nuclear power plants, and in the longer term, contracting with companies trying to develop modular nuclear facilities. And in the nearer term, they're also planning to build a lot of new natural gas-fired power plants. And so, these people, these central planners like Jennifer Granholm and at the Department of Energy, and in this crazy, insane Biden administration, which thank God is about to go out of power. They're frustrated because the transition's not happening according to plan, just as we all, and many others predicted it wouldn't, it couldn't. It just defies the laws of physics and thermodynamics. And, those things matter. They're laws, they're not suggestions. And we're all going to have to coexist. We're going to have to limit, I think, the dissemination of wind and solar because that is causing costs to increase on our power grids and making it harder and harder for grid managers to maintain reliability. And we're just going to have to find ways to, assuming the science continues to say that carbon emissions are this big problem, we're going to have to find ways to reduce those out of existing technologies rather than all this pie in the sky nonsense with renewables that we unfortunately have thrown away trillions of dollars on already. And reality, which is the theme of our podcast, is prevailing.
Yes, and it's interesting that this article in Project Syndicate, which tends to be quite left of center, it was written by two professors from NYU. One's emeritus and one is still teaching there. But they made a really interesting point that I have this quote here where they said, one option faced with this reality is to ignore the evidence and press ahead. And this is what we have in the UK, in Canada, in the European Union, and in the former Biden administration. It's like, just ignore the evidence, press ahead with this. But they also make the case that in doing so, like in these different energy policies, you can't have it come at the cost of energy sufficiency and reliability or energy security. And I think this is where they're starting to realize that energy security is kind of important. And if you're investing in all of these sort of unreliable means of energy production, here we're speaking primarily about electricity, but when you have energy flowing through the entire economy, if you're taking vehicles and making them unreliable and everything else, it becomes an issue. And I think you really hit the nail on the head when you talk about things like what Norway's thinking. We don't want to do interconnections anymore because it makes things expensive. And when they talk about energy security, they often say, well, if we have our own wind and solar, then we don't have to rely upon the energy prices being set by the international oil industry or something, from OPEC or whatever, which is such a red herring, because
really
now
is.
you're swapping one dependency for another, which is China, and I think that there was a study released by the conservatives in the UK, which really doesn't say much, but they said that the UK energy transition will create jobs, 170,000 jobs in China.
Yeah, China. Yeah.
In China.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So, Stu, what do you think about coexistence, this new narrative that they're trying to float out there, energy coexistence instead of energy realities?
Over the last 4 years, I have been taking notes with a crayon. And over that time period, we have found that the more money, because David has nailed it, fiscal responsibility and physics matter to energy. It could care less about Republican donkey. It could care less if you're a left-wing UK. It doesn't matter if you're German chancellor tearing down your country. Physics and fiscal responsibility matter. And the more money we have spent on renewable wind and solar, the more fossil fuels we've had. We've had 4 or 5 articles come out across that King Coal is still alive, and it's like the Monty Python, and I love Monty Python. Absolutely, I'm not quite dead yet is absolutely the theme for King Coal. And we had that a while ago on the Energy Realities podcast, the theme of Monty Python. And on a side note, I did get to sit next to John Cleese for about 2.5 hours. He does not breathe. He has gills. He absolutely is the funniest man on the planet, and I never
He's a
heard him
funny, funny
even
guy.
breathe. Anyway, that being said, the more money, and it's like the Scottish trees. The Scottish trees, you've heard me say this before, they're wind turbines. The wind turbine takes power to turn the turbine to get it to enough speed in order to get electricity generating. They've been using diesel powered to run those turbines to get them to run wind, which is fossil fuels, which then turns around and then they cut down 14 million trees in order to put. This is not how fiscal responsibility is designed.
No,
So,
you make a great point about energy security. Okay. Tammy, I think, made that point too. And we saw that shift. I mean, we're talking about a shift in the narrative today, but we
yep,
saw a shift begin away from this virtue signaling over ESG metrics towards more concerns about energy security early in 2023. And
yep,
I'll never forget, it was during the CERAWeek conference when all the executives come into Houston and they make their presentations, and executive after executive talked about, we're going to dedicate more of our budget now, go back to our core business of oil and gas or nuclear or coal, whatever company they were with. We're going to cut back on all this virtue signaling about ESG, and we're going to go back to making money with our core business. Because why? Because we need to focus on energy security for the country and for the world, and all this focus on all these other things, these ancillary, non-profitable renewable ventures, were causing a diminution in energy security everywhere. And it was most obvious in Europe in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but it's also becoming obvious in the United States and other parts of the world. And, the fact of the matter is, energy security is national security.
Yeah.
And I think, everybody's learned that lesson now. And so the world's kind of returning back to more of a market-based approach, despite the best efforts of all these central planners in the Western world. And that's all starting to show up in election results all across Europe at this point, even in Germany now. And,
yeah,
so
Well,
it's, or hopefully in Germany.
it is and it isn't. Like, I think America has been the real bellwether on this, and the country that probably is most able to say no to this
Right.
nonsense and the absurdities. Whereas in Europe, even though because of how the parties are distributed in every country, there's like usually a minimum of 5 or 6, probably 7 parties, if not more. And so then you get a fragmented parliamentary system, which then even if conservatives get a majority, what's a majority out of 7 or 8 parties? And then you have the anti-democratic idea that you can just ban a party because you don't like it, like what's happening in Germany. They can throw whatever they want to say about the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland. Um, and usually none of those accusations actually stand up to much scrutiny. And the
Right.
fact that Romania now is they rejected that election outcome. Excuse me. And they're not going to hold another election until March.
Whoop.
whoops.
That's how I felt earlier this morning.
Oh, I love her new chair.
Oh, I like that
Oh,
too. That's awesome.
um,
But she's right about what's been happening in Europe and them denying the ability of these conservative parties, even when they prevail in an election, they don't allow them, all the rest of the parties gang up and refuse to enable them to form a majority government. in the parliament. And in the
Right.
U.S., of course, we have a two-party system, and so election
Oh,
results are
did you say
more.
one party system in the U.S., David? I'm sorry, one party?
Well, it's a uniparty system, but we pretend we have two parties. Yes, we certainly
Sorry.
have a difference in outlook between presidential candidates of the two parties in recent elections. We didn't so much in 2008 or 2012, but we have the last three elections. And that's because the Republican Party has become essentially the populist party in this country now, instead of, just a wing of the Democratic Party, which it had functioned as for so long. Anyway, I'm sorry, Stu, I interrupted you a minute ago.
Oh no, Tammy, I hope you're okay. You look great. You absolutely are doing great. One of the fun things I put out on my podcast this morning was I put out, let's see here, it was without natural gas, regimes will change. And I've been talking with several folks around the world. We have Chancellor Scholz, who has been begging Putin. He's had 3 calls with Putin saying, I want Nord Stream turned back on. He's trying to figure it out. He's realized he's shut down his nuclear plants. He's now trying to negotiate. You has, as Tammy, before she had her asphyxiation and death maul there, I'm not sure if this next clip is Tammy in her office or if this is Chancellor Schultz realizing that his decisions on energy are about to cause a regime change in Germany. We have, I believe, here he is, Chancellor Schultz, causing self-inflicted pain. So not only did the squirrel knock the broom over, he then goes over and says, oh, wait a minute, the broom fell on me. Isn't that great? What a great squirrel. So did I just call Chancellor Schultz a squirrel? I believe I did, Tammy.
Squirrels are too cute for Chancellor Schultz.
Okay. But the bottom line is we have Germany, we have New York, we have New Jersey, we have California, and sometimes the UK are doing these kind of things. And since Tammy was drinking, she's not going to get dinged for that comment. So we have countries that are not listening to the physics and fiscal responsibility of this and regime change. What we're finding is even in Syria, Assad is now in Russia, and the reason that Assad was taken out was because he did not allow a pipeline to go through so that it would continue to trade in the petrodollar is the reason he is taken out. I'll go on record on saying that.
And who organized the taking out of Assad?
Well, considering the new ISIS leader in Syria has been in communication, and this is off of a gentleman that I trust, Tony Segura, has posted out that the President Obama has been in contact with this gentleman since 2009 and is now the new leader in ISIS in Syria. I'll let it just go from there.
Yeah.
And the U.S. has now removed the bounty on his head.
Yeah.
Imagine that. And it's all because of the pipeline. I've got about 4 more podcasts coming up with George McMillan, and he and I are talking about how the Asia area is all about pipelines. And it's about how the United States has tried to corner in cheap Russian natural gas, which is stupid. Why don't you work with them? Why don't we all let everybody, and this is my opinion, let's let everybody have the lowest cost power that they can possibly get and trade with each other, and the world will be a better place. Wow, what's up with that noise?
That's a good point.
I have a theory
I
about all that, but I'm not going to say it on this show. Anyway, go ahead, Tammy. Sorry.
Okay. I was gonna just kind of link back to what you had been saying, David, about, all these new energy demands with the AI centers and how these large corporations are wanting reliable 24/7 energy, so they're buying their own means of production, whether it's they're going to build their own natural gas plant or whatever. But on the other hand, these are major corporations that have to deal with, despite what happened at CERAWeek, they still have to deal with a lot of these ESG metrics, or
Oh,
they want a
sure.
virtue signal or whatever. So then what they do is they invest in unreliable energy for the rest of us.
Yeah.
So they have reliable energy for their AI data centers and the other data centers in order to monitor everything that we're doing at a nice reduced rate for them. And then they pay to have unreliable energy for the rest of us so they can virtue signal about how green they are.
Yeah.
So it's just another one of these kind of, for the lesser people, we can have unreliable energy, but for those very important tech companies, they get reliable energy.
Well, and it's going to create ultimately, and I think it probably already is. I've seen articles about the concern that ultimately you're going to tie up so much investment capital, and it's not an infinite amount of that in the energy space with these corporate demands that is not going to
Yeah.
be interconnected into the grid,
Yeah.
that you're going to end up harming reliability on the power grid that powers all the homes in a given state. I know our lieutenant governor in Texas is quite concerned about that. And there's probably going to be some legislation considered in this next session of the legislature to try to regulate all that. But I just don't know that the Texas legislature, frankly, has the intellectual power to really understand how properly to do that. We'll see. But it is a concern, and I think it's a very valid one because, it's a pie of financial capital available to the power generation sector, that a larger and larger percentage of it is now going to these corporate needs. And, it's going to become a real problem in the United States, and I assume in Canada and in Europe as well.
Well, I know that this is one of your stories that you're going to talk about, but one of the developments that hasn't really slowed down is the desire for climate disclosures and full on environmental social governance disclosures. And that's asking for all kinds of additional information on a company's financial statements. And because it's included in a financial statement, there's various legalities that are tied to that. And the European Union has gone the farthest, the fastest with their corporate social, I don't know, something, it's CSDDD, and it's these disclosures, and there's 12 volumes of aspects that companies have to deal with, whether there's, I think, 4 related to energy, 3 related to the social part and modern slavery and all that kind of stuff, and then a couple on governance, and then some general sustainability ones. And uh, Qatar has said, if you're going to make us fill out all this information to trade with you, which will cost us at least 5% on, what we're shipping to you, we're not going to ship you LNG anymore.
Yeah.
So, and Canada just released on Friday, its climate and sustainability disclosure standard that's based on the international one. So it's like, what are you guys doing? That I think more companies like Qatar need to push back and say, you know what? No, we don't want to do this. It's a waste of time. It's costly. It's expensive. Why should we be doing this? And
Yeah.
I'm
So
sorry, I
Qatar,
gazumped your article there, David.
no, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, I got plenty of other stuff to talk about. And let's just keep on that. Qatar Energy is a national oil and gas company, and has a lot more freedom operating where they do to say things like that. And the point I made in a piece I wrote this morning about this is that corporate leaders in the United States are not going to have either the ability or the political will to do that unfortunately. I mean, obviously the best response from a global perspective to that EU measure, which is impossible to honestly fulfill by a corporation. You can't trace all that. You don't know what else happening throughout your entire supply chain on issues like that. Is to all stand up and say, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to comply with it. You want our gas, then you just need to rescind that. And if everybody did that, then it would go away pretty quick because Europe needs the gas. But Qatar Energy, as they're situated, if they want to give up the EU market, that's fine with them because they have bigger markets to pursue in Asia and Africa. So it's not a big deal to them. But U.S. companies are going to, assuming Qatar holds firm, then they're going to see a vacuum developing in the European market. They're all going to want to access that. So they're going to, bend the knee and say, oh, gosh, we'll create a whole new department within our company. And we're going to virtue signal to you guys. And we're going to pretend we can trace all this. And we're going to add it to our sustainability report. It's going to be wonderful and flowery. And we'll have unicorns and fairy dust associated with it. It'll be great. Just so they can get a share of that market. And if it costs them 5%, well, that's not really a big deal. They're making 40% profit. And so, it's just, I mean, you're never going to get unity on that. And that's why, a long-winded way around to explaining why these basically socialist, communist central planners at the EU and not just there, but in other Western countries are able to do these things. And so they'll get compliance and they'll keep getting their gas. And then they'll just meet next year and consider an even more onerous proposal to lay on the corporate world, knowing that the costs are going to just be borne by average ratepayers in these other countries for the higher cost of their fuel for power generation. And it's a vicious cycle that, unfortunately, I don't think, unless these more conservative political parties are able to actually assume power in these European countries, is ever going to stop.
Yeah. And then there's the whole inertia of bureaucracy that doesn't necessarily want to bring changes to how this is operating. There's so many vested interests in this now, especially in the EU. Stu, what do you think about all that?
I think that people are tired of having energy policies shoved down their throat. And I feel that there is a global awakening that is going to be happy for 2025. I'm disappointed the wars aren't already over. I made a mistake. I thought they'd be over by now. Here we are on the 23rd, and I thought it'd already be over. But I think that I have a video, and I think this video is very, very how I think the world feels coming into 2025. So put yourself in this guy's position here, okay? That we've lived through a tough 4 years. Let's take a look at him. And I love his reaction.
He's upside down.
Right? He's upside down. And he just, all right, we're in 2025. There we go. So, yes, he just has a car wreck. He's driving down, he's minding his own business, and bam! So, I think that Cutter, the prince that said that, the scope 1 stupidity, or the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, it would have cost him. Why would I want to give up 4 or 5% of my profits back to the EU? The EU leaders are troglodytes. They absolutely think they can club their way through life, and it's not going to bite them in the bahonkas. Guess what? It's about to bite them in the bahonkas. Can I say bahonkas on this podcast?
I think that's an officially approved word here.
Oh, okay. I got demonetized the other day for saying something, and it was pretty funny. But, when you sit back, I like being demonetized because it means I'm actually speaking the truth when I don't swear. So the important thing is that we as humanity need to let everybody do their own thing. Okay, you want to go do your own thing, go do your own thing, but be fiscally responsible and follow the laws of physics. David has said that so well for so long, and wind turbines and solar have their place. I'm going to be the first to admit, I think, David, your comments just a minute ago are very important because we're going to see energy racism, if you would. And I said that energy racism for the underprivileged folks, because the AI data centers that have the money will create microgrids, and they will use nuclear, and then they will use whatever they can, and they will have the abilities to create their own microgrids. And in their microgrids, they're going to be better off financially. Right now in Iran, there is an energy crisis going on. The energy, 2 days ago on Saturday, the energy minister had to make a decision of either natural gas going to people's homes to heat it or putting power to the power plant. And so you're seeing that not only is there natural gas problems in, Iran, you've got them in all across the EU coming around the corner. And then you have the UK. And I love your comment with Norway just a little bit ago. Oops, we don't want an interconnect. It's really stupid to have an interconnect. Interconnects are the dumbest thing on the planet. I don't understand why people spend billions, because for every mile you go that way, you lose a certain amount of energy, and that's just more energy you got to put into that pipe. It does not fiscally make sense.
But, the United States and now Canada are investing so much into interconnections. And I like you say, it's a huge waste of money, and quite
I
often. Go ahead.
I want to ask your opinion. What, from a Canadian's viewpoint, Tammy, you're half Canadian, half UK. What do you think of Trump in two things? He said he's going to reclaim the Panama Canal, which I think is actually hilarious. And then he says also he's going to annex Canada. And his trolling of Trudeau was absolutely hilarious when he says, do you want to be the governor? Go ahead. I think that was hilarious. What do you think?
Well, as a Canadian, I believe in our sovereignty, and I appreciate the trolling. Justin Trudeau is not the best prime minister Canada's ever had. And
nope.
Yeah, I think the trolling is funny, but Canada needs to remain sovereign, because then we get pulled into, if you guys have a bad government like you just had 4 years of, then we'd be pulled into that nonsense too. So
Yeah.
somebody's gotta. I heard a comedian this morning call what was it? Mexico snowman or something like that, and that's referring to Canada. I can't remember now. It's really funny though. But maybe we should move on to the news articles.
All right.
Okay. There we go. Let's see who's
good morning to Robert De Domenico. Thank you for chiming in. Okay.
Morning,
good morning.
We love Robert.
He's right about solar panels. Good for satellites.
Good for satellites. And wherever you can't run a line, Robert, I've got solar panels where I don't want to pay $5,000 to run a power line. So there is a reason for them. I love this. Yeah. For our podcast listeners, by definition, half of all people are dumber than average. Energy makes that most apparent. I couldn't agree more. And we have Gail. Welcome, Gail. Canada is Arctic Mexico. Holy smokes. Gail, with your permission, I'm going to steal that one. That is absolutely steal worthy.
So ipso facto, I guess Mexico is desert Canada. Okay. Took a minute for everybody to get that. Anyway, so let's go to the articles here. Jennifer Granholm's long, strange trip at the DOE is coming to an end finally. Her last shot across the bow was the release of the DOE report on LNG exports last week. Last Tuesday, it was released. On Monday, she leaked a 3-page letter to the New York Times in which she exaggerated and mischaracterized the findings in the study in order to punch them up and cause them to have more of a public opinion impact. It failed, typically, classically, and predictably, and the Wall Street Journal editorial board did a wonderful job of detailing her exaggerations and mischaracterizations a day after I did the same thing at Forbes. Anyway, she's probably the least qualified person I've ever seen in that job, and I've seen a lot of unqualified persons in that job. Good riddance to her. Hopefully she'll go retire. She's in her 70s now, as she deserves a long, glorious retirement, although I suspect we'll see her run for the Senate or a congressional seat or something, just because there's so much grift to be had. We talked about the Cutter story, and then I like that illustration that I had Grok do for me, which is the
Nice.
American bald eagle draped around, "You are the carbon they want to reduce," which is true. You are the carbon they ultimately want to reduce, and they're doing a good job of it. I saw a report yesterday that global birth rates have now fallen so dramatically that the global population is going to start falling in the next few years, which is, of course, long been a goal of people like Bill Gates and other billionaire social planners. So they're winning. And I'm done.
Okay. That's awesome, David. Those were such great stories that you wrote on Substack and over the past week or so. So my stories today, the first one is the world's coal demand at record high in 2024, the IEA says. And I kept thinking, where's peak coal? I thought we were at peak coal a couple years ago. You know, they keep trotting that out. And, oh, really, next year it's going to be lower. Next year it's going to be lower. Kind of like the climate change thing, you know, where every year it's going to be ice free in the Arctic or whatever. And so, yeah, the IEA came out and there was another increase in coal production and coal use. China has been producing more coal than ever. India, of course, is building more coal-fired power plants. So is Pakistan. Pakistan was in a unique situation, which links back to the Qatari dealings with the EU, because they did have long-term contracts with Pakistan, and Pakistan had made a number of investments in natural gas power plants. And then when the war broke out between Russia and Ukraine, the EU was desperate, and they went and said, please, Qatar, supply us with LNG. We'll pay whatever you want. So Qatar broke their contract with Pakistan and diverted all those shipments to the EU. So Pakistan was like, okay, what are we going to do? And of course, they built coal because coal's a little more reliable. You can stockpile it. And, you know, in all fairness, if you're using newer coal power technology, the emissions aren't as high as they were, say, 20 years ago. So why not do the energy coexistence, the energy realities, the energy addition, where you use what's good for your jurisdiction, as long as you're trying to minimize the amount of particulate emissions and you know, the environment. So yeah, Robert DiDomenico has a great comment here. He said, coal, it costs the least of all primary energy sources. Of course, demand is up, except among those of us governed by sanctimonious hypocrites. And that's a great segue into article number 2, which is in the UK. So this article was from the UK Daily Mail, written by Andrew Neil. And the title, for those who are just listening, it says, Ed Miliband's net zero mania isn't just a threat to energy security. It's making us so reliant on China, he's now a threat to national security. And I think that really just sums up the whole article. He goes through quite in a lengthy way, detailing all of the different issues with this drive towards net zero and just how terrible it is for energy security, food security, national security. And 1/3 of the UK EVs currently being marketed are made in China, and that will
Okay.
likely increase with the 2030, 2035, whatever banning of internal combustion engine that UK is doing. Um, 2/3 of all the wind turbines are made in China. There was an article in the Epoch Times, I think this morning or maybe yesterday, where they were talking about the weaponization of the rare earth minerals supply chains. So even if, let's say, the UK wanted to make their own solar panels or they wanted to make their own turbines, a lot of the materials required to make them have to be sourced from China. And China is now using that, wielding it as a weapon in order to assert its power on the global stage and get concessions, or maybe just to make people suffer. I don't know.
Okay.
So one of the other things that he makes the art, because Ed Miliband has come out and said, well, this will save us from being reliant on the crazy OPEC oil prices or whatever, and we won't have to rely upon all these other places for natural gas. And he points out, but there's a lot of natural gas offshore the UK. There's also a lot onshore, but they ban fracking, and they've made it such a terrible um the process to explore and produce natural gas offshore the UK is insane. So what company's going to want to do it? So the UK has a lot of resources that, like Europe, they choose not to develop. And then they
Yeah.
complain that things are expensive. So
Well,
yeah,
and
you want to add to
I
that,
just
David?
want to say, I know people probably get tired of hearing me say this, but we've been talking about this reality for years now on this podcast, that literally every solution being advanced for this energy transition has the end result of empowering China and
Yeah.
ceding our economic and energy security and national security to China. This has been obvious to anyone who is willing to honestly take a look at this for years now. And yet we still have people like Ed Miliband and what's the guy's name again? Mark Carney in Canada and
Yeah.
Jennifer Granholm here in the United States, doing everything they can to keep pushing us in this direction. And it's ultimately a program to surrender our sovereignty to China. That's what it is.
Can I
And
add this, David, to that?
it's good to be right, but it's terrible to be right. Anyway.
It is. Jimmy Carter sold the Panama Canal for $1. And I've seen stories that either the United States paid for the Panama Canal. Anywhere from 5,000 to 30,000 people died in the United States digging that ditch.
34,000.
Yes, and a fact check said no 5,000, and I'm like, yeah. Anyway, so when you sit back and take a look at this, and Trump is right, because now China controls both the entrances to the Panama Canal. Was Jimmy Carter compromised when he sold it for $1 by the Chinese? That's the way the Chinese think about things. I just want to throw that out there. Here's one from Neville Davies. Neville, Miliband has a go slow on nuclear as they realize nuclear is a threat to renewables long term. Well said. I like that. And I think that's why Germany got rid of all of theirs. France has 54 nuclear plants. They're still running at 27% capacity because they stripped out their maintenance on their nuclear. Oops. But now they're upcharging the electricity that they're exporting to Germany so they can put maintenance back into their nuclear. You can't buy this kind of entertainment.
Yeah.
Oh,
Before
snap.
before reading this Robert one, I want to just add to the UK madness. So there was an article last week also in the Daily Mail, I think might be the Telegraph, where they were talking to a junior researcher who has been working in the civil service, I think probably when the Conservatives were still in power. And so he was looking at the demand and supply data for energy in the UK. And he noticed that the supply was dropping and demand was increasing. And so he went to the secretary or the people in charge and said, look, I'm looking at these numbers. We're phasing out, we're shutting down coal and we're shutting down nuclear. And there's all this demand, but we're not building enough of the reliable backstop. And he was told, apparently, according to the article, oh, don't worry. The National Energy Organization, the planners, they'll take care of that. You don't have
Yeah.
to worry about it. They've got it all sorted. And the guy said, it occurred to me there are no adults in the room because I'm pointing out this data and they just look at it and laugh and shrug and ha ha ha, someone
Yeah.
else will take care of it.
Yeah.
You are the someone else. And you're letting it, you're shutting down stuff and making energy unreliable and expensive because there's not enough. Sorry,
That's
that's
funny.
my little
Oh,
addition there.
absolutely right.
Let's go back to
Robert
Robert.
says, sorry to disagree, David. Granholm et al. Are focused primarily on lining their own pockets. It just so happens that they don't care of our country is the ultimate casualty of their corruption. And yeah, I think that's, I think that's right.
Hey,
Yeah.
thank you, Gail. She says, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to y'all. Merry Christmas to you, Gail. Travel safe with all your truckers there. See you next time.
Yep.
All right.
Yes, and Merry Christmas to everybody too. But we're not done yet. Anyway, go ahead. Stu, you're up.
Okay. Biden, if you can't stand him enough now, and he's not running the country anyway, but this article, let me go here. Oh, also, Tammy has
Tammy's
got
one
her.
more. Sorry.
Oh no, we want to make sure everybody know that her Substack is coming alive and doing great. And this was Irina this morning. Hello, Irina. Oh no, that's her cat. Okay, if you don't hate Biden enough now, Biden's EPA officially permitted California to ban new car gas sales in Golden State by 2035. California has long standing authority to request waivers from EPA to protect its residents from dangerous air pollution coming over, blah, blah, blah. So the big thing, though, is there's 17 states that have in their legislation that they can follow whatever the stupidity that California does. They can also put into theirs. So the Biden administration, by them saying you can get rid of ICE cars or internal combustion cars by 2035, impacts 17 other states. And this is a gigantic finger to President Biden. I just find it totally despicable. Did I say that?
Can Trump reverse that?
Do what?
Can Trump reverse that?
Oh, it's going to be difficult. The amount of landmines and horse crap and donkey crap that this administration is doing is absolutely, in my opinion, treasonous and should be tried as treason. Let's go to the next story. Biden erects another last-minute roadblock to dump energy's deposit Biden agenda. This is on the exports, and this is about very much the same thing with David's article on Jennifer Granholm. She is absolutely the worst energy secretary that we've ever had. I think that she was up there with. Man. It is, and I think she's up there with Pete Buttigieg for being the worst energy or travel secretary. The Secretary of Transportation. That man is a potato bud has more brain power than he has. Anyway, it's time to lift the pause on the new LNG export permits and restore American energy. Blah, blah, says Mike Summers, president and CEO of the American Petroleum Institute. I like him. He's a cool cat. After nearly a year of politically motivated pause that only weakened the global energy security, it's never been clear the U.S. LNG is critical. If you have a president stand there and says, we will sell you all the LNG we need, you want, and then they do this,
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, come on. And then we take a look at Azerbaijan was trying to broker the EU via the Ukraine deal. I expected this to go through. And I have to admit when I'm wrong, which is like quite often, but this one was, I was expecting it to be done. And when we see more and more people needing regime changes will happen with no natural gas. So,
Yeah, I on that one, I think let's just give it a few months and see how it turns out.
you bet.
Things are going
Yeah.
to start changing very quickly on January 20th.
Yeah.
I think so. And I really, and for it has come out that President Biden could have stopped the Ukraine war 2 months in.
Yeah.
2 weeks in. Yeah.
To
Not even before it started.
Yeah.
thank you.
Technically.
Yeah,
I mean,
I mean when
Kamala
they,
went over there, and what happened? Like within 24 hours, he got attacked.
oh yeah, I mean, so you can't buy this kind of treachery in a government.
Well,
So I'm
you
wondering,
have
like with all of these different initiatives that are rolling out now in the final weeks of the Biden administration, and there's all of these stories coming out that Biden actually isn't coherent and not really doing anything, and there's other people who are doing stuff. Doesn't that call into question all of these things that are being pushed forward if he's not the one actually doing it?
should. It ought to, yeah. But the way our system works, of course, you'd have to have, I mean, all of it's going to end up having to be challenged in court regardless. And the Supreme Court is going to end up making an awful lot of energy and other societal policy over the next several years. Because, yeah, I mean, he's been non compos mentis for a long time. I first heard about his advancing dementia when I was still lobbying in Washington in 2013. It was an open
Yeah.
secret in Washington, D.C., but everybody just thought, well, he's just the vice president. Vice president doesn't do anything anyway. Who cares? And it was the main reason why Obama didn't want him running in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. And then they decided to just install him in 2020. They jumped on the COVID opportunity to do that, and they did it. And
I
yeah,
want to
we've
ask
had 4
there's
years of a
something.
pretend presidency with a president who's not real.
So why wasn't the 25th Amendment ever
Well, you'd have to
discussed or
have
anything?
honest people in the cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment, and that's why we ended up with people like Granholm and what's his Buttigieg, I mean, and all the rest of them. If you don't have any honest people in the cabinet who are willing to do that, and nobody in Congress with the guts to stand up and tell the truth, and so we've had a 4 year farce, and we're paying an enormous
Yeah.
price.
Yeah.
And it's not
Well
a
said.
conspiracy, folks. It's reality.
I want to ask this question, and I don't know the answer to this, but if President Biden is not mentally capacitated, able to stand trial, he's not capable of making decisions. Is anything that he signs into law challengeable in court?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
It should be. But again, nobody exercised the 25th Amendment to take him out. There's a constitutionally designed remedy for
Right.
this.
But
Yeah.
do you understand?
And so
You understand what I'm
that really
saying is that
wasn't
there's also
exercised.
another president that it could be challenged if he was not a legitimate president.
I'm sorry, say
So
that again.
there is another president with birth certificate issues that could come into play. And that is a question I have
I'm not
no
getting into
idea on. No, I don't want to get into it either. I'm just saying that if the president of the United States is not capable or legal, can his laws that he signs in be challenged? I'm curious to know that one. I don't know the answer to that. So
Robert De Domenico summed it all up really well in that last comment. It's all a stinking heap of Bolshevik.
I
I think
agree.
that's
And the amount of
exactly it.
pardons that Biden has done is absolutely disgusting.
Well,
But we'll leave.
I mean, but again, so here's just a great example of what's happened the last 4 years. Last week, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post all published long, detailed articles detailing how, as early as 2019, everybody knew Biden was not capable. Okay, non compos mentis, doesn't know where he is a lot
Yeah.
of the time, much less what he's doing. And yet, on that pardon that Stu just referenced of, everybody on death row under federal death penalty just had or 37 out of the 40, had their sentences commuted. And how did they all report it? By Joe Biden. Well, Joe Biden didn't make that decision.
Yeah.
He probably didn't sign the order. Joe Biden's not capable of doing any of that. He doesn't know any of this. And but it's the same newspapers who wrote those articles a week ago, are still reporting that Joe Biden's doing this and conducting the office. He's not, and he hasn't been since day one. And it's just been it's mind-boggling, really, the level of fraud and the magnitude of the fraud that has consequences not just for the United States but for the whole world, because
Yeah.
of how powerful the United States is as a country. And that's been allowed to happen with the full cooperation and complicity with everyone, literally everyone, in the legacy news media in this country. And really with BBC, I mean, everybody in Europe's known it too. Everybody in Canada's known it too. It's just stunning. It's really stunning how the
Do you think that's why
exercise
your
of
Substack, David? I think podcasts, the Substacks, Irina Substack, which is at Irina Slav.substack.com, and the NemethReport.substack.com, Blackman.substack.com. I think that's the reason that our podcasts are doing so well. Podcasts, Substack are actually where people get a lot of their truth news.
X. And yeah, I mean, no, it's and it's because of this, because everyone now, I mean, most every American understands the fraud at this point, and they can see who's responsible and who's been complicit in it. And so I think these organizations, you see their ratings dying, their audiences dying, their subscriber base dying, and because they're dying and they've lost their credibility and any moral authority to tell us what the truth is, because they have hidden the truth or tried to for all these years. And it's just really depressing when you think about what we've been through. Completely illegitimate.
Let's end on a positive note, because
Yeah.
it is the day before Christmas Eve, and that is, it's looking like things are going to change in the new year
Yeah.
with the new administration. And I can only hope that the Qatari position on LNG will wake up the EU a little bit, and hopefully other countries will also start to step up and resist some of this overbearing environmental, climate, social governance reporting that is
Very
being requested.
great. Just like that guy that had a wreck and reaches over and turns the radio up.
Turns it
Very
up.
much. It turns it up. Let's have some great times.
Robert's final comment here is, you do well because you speak the truth. People can only swallow so much before they demand real sustenance.
And with that, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry
Christmas, everybody.
Christmas.
Hey,
Way to
we are
sum it
going
up.
to have predictions next week for everybody. We have
That's
Irina Slav with her predictions. Tammy, what are your predictions? Kind of give us a little tease. David, give us your prediction, a little tease. No idea yet?
I have no idea. I haven't started on that yet.
I haven't either, but I
I'm
think
not
we're
going to
going to
give it
stumble
away.
Cole. I think Cole's going to be coming back next year.
Yeah, I think
I'm
Cole
just
makes a
kidding.
comeback. Yeah, that's
Have
right.
a great time,
It'll be
guys.
fun.
Merry Christmas
Bye,
to everybody.
Merry Christmas, everyone. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Bye, David.